We're on Nun Zayin Amud Beis. Five lines to the bottom of the page.
Beginning of the line starts Sheva is
Shiva is B'chais. Yeah, we're toward the end of that line. Rishua ben Levi.
Okay.
Rishua ben Levi Amar. Now we're 4 lines from the bottom. Zumila Shnita Bishmini. So he's going back on the original pasuk that we saw earlier. Ki alecha haragna kol hayom, because we were slaughtered all day for it. We were treated like sheep to the slaughter. Rabbi Levi says that the alecha haragna kol hayom is not a reference to actually being killed. It's a reference to Mila. Shnita Bishmini that was given on the 8th day. Shimon Lakish says, and it's a different reference. These are Torah scholars that teach how to slaughter an animal by illustrating on themselves, which is not a good practice to do, as you might imagine. In other words, one should not even do a pretended demonstration of how to slaughter using his own neck. A person could use himself for an illustration for anything, with the exception of slaughter. And something else. That would be tsaras, it's a spiritual affliction of leprosy, because it sort of causes it puts himself in a condition where he's more susceptible to it. Rav Nachman Yitzchak says, these are scholars that, so to speak, kill themselves over Torah study. Like Rav Shimon Lakish said, good morning. That Torah studies is not, it doesn't last unless a person, kills himself over it. The connection here is that the Torah is compared to somebody who dies in a tent, and obviously the practical component here is that someone who dies. This is the law of someone who dies in a tent, that the entire tent, the house, becomes tummy. Anything inside becomes tummy. But the lesson there also is that if a person wants to get Torah, he has to sort of kill himself over learning, in a killing himself in a idiomatic way. He obviously doesn't actually die. Okay. Going back to the destruction of the temple, Amar Rabba Bar Barchana, Amar Rabbi Yechanan. Rabba Barchana says in the name of Rabbi Yechanan, our Bo'im saw Kitzutzei Tefillin Nimtzu B'Rosh Rugi Beitar. If anybody's ever been to the either Auschwitz or Majdanek, and you've been there, so there's a famous room in both of these places that they call the room of the shoes. And so you see how many people were killed by the amount of shoes there. So there's the Gemara here is giving a different example, similar idea, which is that there was 40 saw. That's basically a mikvah full of tefillin. Something equivalent to the volume of 400 liters of tefillin. Nimtzu b'rosh harugi beitar, on the heads of those that were killed in Beitar. Rabbi Shmuel Amar. Rabbi Yanai says in the name of Rabbi Shmuel. Shalosh kupais shal arba'am saw. There were 3 measurements, each one of 40 saw, so 3 times the measurement. Masni Satana in the Brisa we learned arba'am kupais shal shalosh son. There were 40 measurements, each of 3 saw. Right, so 3 times 40 or 40 times 3 is effectively the same number. Now the first opinion says there were only 40 saw, not 3 times that number. So the Gemara says, it's not a debate. Ha dereisha, ha dedara. The tefillin of the head is larger. That's because before the modern era, basically today, if you look at your tefillin shal reish, tefillin you wear up here, they have 4 different compartments, and sort of squeezed together, and you can see the lines. Today we have these very powerful presses and all sorts of advanced metallurgy that allows us to mill precise parts and make things in a very precise way. But it wasn't always the case that wasn't always the case. And therefore, it was often the case that shalosh tefillin were larger than shliad, because there's no other way to make them. So even though there were 4 compartments in the shalosh and only 1 in the shliad, but the shalosh tefillin were only 3 times the size, not 4 times the size. Okay. Omer Ravasi said, Arbo kabin mayach. There were 4 Arbo kabin mayach. There were 4 measurements of brains. Nimtzol aven achas. They were found in 1 stone. Ula says Tish's cabin was 9 cabin. Amar of Kahana v'Tema Shila bar Mari Micro. What's the source of this? Bas Bavel Hashaduda Asher Shalmloch Asher Sheyechas and Ibitz Alayach al Sela. The reward for the Babylonians killing Jews is that what they did to us, which was that they smashed our young ones on the rock, should occur to them.
Rabbi, this is also including the prelude to the Birkat Hamazon during the week.
Yeah, and on our bubble, yeah. Okay. B'nai Tzion Haikarim HaMusulam Bapaz, the children of Tzion, who were prestigious, more beautiful than gold. My Musulam Bapaz, what does that mean? They cover themselves in gold. Amri Debei, Rav Shila taught, Tarti Metakli Istiri Pisa and Nachos Ba'alma. There were 2 measurements of gold that came down to the world. One in Rome and the other one everywhere else. So the Gemara presumes from this that it's unlikely that they were as glittered in gold as the Romans, and therefore it's unlikely that was a compliment worthy of giving them. They were physically attractive. And the Gemara gives an example of what that means. Mikara initially. Chashivi de Ramoy, the prestigious people of Rome, have an akiti bal yuna de gushpanko umashamshi arisasayo. They would take these, they had these signet rings that were apparently engraved in a very beautiful manner, and they would look at them when they were to get intimate with their wives so that their children should be beautiful. After the conquest of Jerusalem, Ma'asu b'nei Yisrael, they would bring Jewish children, va'asr b'kari de pariah, they would tie them to the their bedposts, and then they were intimate with their wives, gazing at them. So somebody one said to his friend, where is this written down? Where is their source that this would be their punishment? There will be other penalties that will be given that aren't written down in the Torah. That's what the Jewish people suffer by having to sort of, be present and be gazed upon during these prestigious Romans' intimacy. Omar, so the guy who asked the question, he said, I haven't reached that pasuk in Chumash, I'm not holding there. Omar Lay, so he said to him, Inged pusta upalga, you're just a page and a half away. Had I gotten into that pasuk, I would have understood. I wouldn't have asked the question. I would have understood on my own that there were other things that would befall the Jewish people that aren't written down in the Torah. Amar Yehudah, Amar Shmuel, Mishum Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. Rabbi Yehudah said in the name of Shmuel, in the name of Shmuel, my eyes cry from all the daughters of the city. What is this a reference to? There were 400 shuls, synagogues in Beitar. Each shul had 400 teachers of children. There were 400 students to each teacher. When the enemy entered, they would stab the enemy with The transit chutreim, sticks. But when the enemy, won upon them, won over them, conquered them, they tied them together with their books, they burned them alive. The Bryce says, there's a story of Rabbi Shua ben Chananya that entered a large Roman city. They told him, there's a child that's in prison here. He's beautiful eyes, his good looks, his locks and curls are organized. So he went to the prison to try to see who's his child. Amar, he says, he quoted the following pasuk: who gave Yaakov to be plundered and to be stomped, and Yisrael to be Jewish people to be plundered? So the Tinnik answered, he said, we've sinned to God and we haven't followed his ways. We went for we did not follow his Torah. He said, I'm confident that he will be a great teacher. My work now is I will redeem him for whatever value he's worth, but they charge for him. Now, even though typically speaking, we do not redeem captives at more than their value, this scenario was different, presumably because he knew he was going to be a great scholar. Now, that being said, the famous Maharam from Rottenburg in France was in prison and wanted was a bishop or something that wanted an enormous amount of money to redeem him. And the Maharam did not allow himself to be redeemed. He was in prison for 15 years. He was in prison for some amount of time until he died, and his body was redeemed 15 years after he died. Okay. Anyway, he did become a great scholar. Who was he? Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha. Now, there was a famous Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha who was also the Kohen Gadol. That was a Gemara. He gave God a blessing famously on Brachas Daf Zayin or Chesam and Aleph. Zayin and Beis Chesam and Aleph, actually. Apparently, this was his grandson. This wasn't, or maybe it was him himself. But then, if that happened, this story clearly was before the destruction of the temple. Rabbi Yehudah Rav. Yehudah says the name of Rav. Ma'asav ibnoyu b'tisha Rabbi Shmuel ben Elisha. Now we're talking about the famous Kohen Gadol. This is a piyut, that one of the kinnis that's read both nighttime and daytime. Which one is it? Can't remember which one. Can't remember the name of the kinnah offhand. But this story is quoted in that kinnah. I believe it's the end. I think it's only said once. It's said by. I think it's a day, one of the day kinnis. Okay, so a son and daughter were captured by two separate masters. Liyam one day, and his dad they met each other. Zaymer one says, Yeshli Evid, I have a son. He's the most beautiful man I've ever seen. Zaymer, and the other one said, she's the prettiest woman I've ever seen. So they said, let's marry them to each other and we'll split the children. They put them in a room. They each sat in a different corner. One of them, the son said, I'm a Kohen, son of Kohen Gadol. As a shifcha, am I going to be able to marry? It's degrading. They'll have to marry a slave, a maidservant. The Zoysa and she says, Ani Kohenes bas Kohanim Gedolim. I'm a Kohenes, the son of a Kohen Gadol, and Asila Eved. Each of them cried the whole night. Once the sun broke, they recognized each other. They were brother and sister. They both cried until they died. And Yirmiyah cried on them, and he said, my eyes will be filled with tears over this death. Omer Rish Lakish says, her name was Tzafnas Bas Peniel. What type of name is that? Tzafnas Shakol Tzayfin B'Yafia. People looked at her for her beauty. Bas Peniel, Pitish Shal Kohen Gadol. Sheshimish Lefnei V'Lefnim. Peniel means Pnei Kel, the face of God. So she was the daughter of somebody who served inside of the temple. Shinis al Boshavoi, the captors violated her. Kol halaylo, an entire night. The next morning, Hilbisha Shiva Chalukim, they covered her with seven robes to make her look attractive and try to sell her, right? Seal and Machro, and try to sell her in the marketplace. A very ugly man came. I want to see how beautiful she is. They said to him, you're so ugly. Like they called him an ugly man. Go take her because she's the prettiest woman you'll ever see. So he said to them, Alpha Bikain, I still want to see her beauty. If she did shish chalukim, they started undressing her. They took off 6 robes. But by the time they took off 6 robes, Shvi Karasa, she ripped the 7th one, and she started rolling around in the dirt. Amro, she said, Lefanav Rabbanu Shalom, Master of the universe, Imalenu lechasta al kedushas shimcha hagibar loma letochas. You don't want to have compassion on us, at least have compassion on your great name. V'aleh kohen and Yirmiyah cried on her, and he said, Bas Ami, the daughter of my nation, Chigri Sak, put on sackcloth, v'hispal she be'efer, and roll in the dirt. Evel yoched asilach misbed tamrurim. It will be a day of mourning for you, a eulogy, a pain. He pissed him yavi ashoy alenu, because suddenly the enemy has fell upon you. Okay, alenu sort of means on us. Alech alei on you, meaning Jewish people. Ela alenu kaviyachal alayv alayach. God says the enemy has fell both on me and on you. Amar of Yehudah, Amar Rav. Yehudah says in the name of Rav, this is the verse states, if ishku gever, for oshku gever, they will eshikir is sort of extort. Is that isn't the article translates it?
Press.
What press? Gever, a man, ubeitza in his house, and his house, which is often a reference to his wife. The ish, and a man v'nachlasei, and his inheritance. This is one of the stories that caused the destruction of the temple. Ma'aseh is the following story. There was a certain person, rabbi. He was a student of a professional. He was learning carpentry, and he fell in love with his teacher's wife. He was a carpenter. One day, his master needed to borrow money. He said, send your wife to me, and I will give her the money, and I'll give you a loan. He sent his wife to him. And they messed around for 3 days. And during those 3 days, the student came to the master. He says to him, the wife that you sent me to take the money, in other words, I sent my wife to you to go get money. Where'd she go? So the student says, I sent her right away. He lied, obviously. But I heard that she was violated along the way. So the master said to the student, so what should I do? If you want to listen to my solution, you should divorce her. This is what the student who falls in love with the master's wife tells the master. He says to him, she has a very expensive ksuba. So the student says, I will loan you the money. You'll be able to give her the ksuba. So he took the loan and he divorced his wife. So the student came along, Vanessa, and he went ahead and married the woman that he so desired. The time came for the loan. The loan was due. He couldn't afford to pay up the loan. If you can't pay up the loan, then go work for me until you can pay up the loan. This student and his lover would eat and drink, and the master, former husband, he was standing on top of them and feeding them, sort of being the servant in the house. His eyes, tears would roll down from his cheeks, and it would fall into their cups. Now, this apparently was a very public event, and everyone knew about it, and nobody said anything. And at that moment, the moment where nobody said anything about this evil and corrupt fellow. That's when the judgment was sealed against them that the second temple would be destroyed. The Amri law, some say it wasn't the event that the second part of the event, it was the first part, the fact that they were adulterous. Al shtei psilas b'ner achat, 2 wicks with 1 fire. That is a euphemistic reference to adultery. And because he slept with her before she was divorced, that was an even more despicable component of this equation. Okay. Now I get back to the original Gemara. Lokach minas sikrikin. Okay, back to the sikrikin here.
Say what?
Sikrikin.
Define again real quick, Rabbi.
There was a very, very violent, a couple of very violent, ultra-Orthodox, it was a specific, very violent ultra-Orthodox group in Jerusalem. They call themselves Sikrikin.
Define the term for me again, Rabbi.
Okay, so we'll see very, very critically. So let's define the term here. So remember, there are 3 types of Sikrikin. The Sikrikin is someone who is, with a gun, and he uses it. So he's killing people. He's a murderer. We said that there were 3 types of Sikrikin. The first 2 types, either if they didn't kill Jews, they would be killed. So basically, everybody was a Sikrikin. And the second type was that if you killed a Jew, you paid $4, some trivial fine. In that case, people still kill Jews quite frequently. In either of those scenarios, if you want to save your skin and you give your assets to a Sikrikin, then we presume that that's quite a serious event. In other words, there's no reason to think you weren't serious about it. Okay. That does not have the law of Sikrikin. That has a different set of laws. So what is the law of Sikrikin? Where you have a group of armed thieves, murderers, armed murderers, but this is in a scenario where there is supposedly law and order. Officially, these Sikrikin could get capital punishment for killing you, and you give the Sikrikin your property. So there, it's sort of like it's like a credit. Like a guy's mugged and gives him his credit card. Like, here's a credit card, but 30 seconds I'll be canceling it. That's sort of Sikrikin idea. Like, here's the property, but we'll go to court tomorrow and I'll take it away. That's what a Sikrikin is. Now, there's another category, which is a regular thief. In English, they call it thug. A thug is a big bully, comes a couple of bounces to your property and pushes you off, literally, and then pretends to own the property. We'll see what the laws of thugs are very soon. What's the law of Sikrikin? The original rule was, if you wanted to buy something from Sikrikin, first you buy from the owners, then you buy it from Sikrikin. You buy it from Sikrikin first, then you buy it from the owners. It could be the owners are still scared. Therefore, the sale is not valid. Eventually, they changed the rule. They said you make a payment of 1/4 to the original owner. Why a quarter? Stolen cars are always cheaper. Apparently, there's a market for stolen cars. If you buy a stolen car, how much cheaper do you get it for? Well, at least in the time of Chazal, stolen property was 25% less. Now, if you go to the pawn shop, things are marked down considerably. So it's typically 25%. So the rabbi said as follows.
It's called a 5-finger discount.
Is it?
Yeah, because you're taking something.
Okay, so apparently the discount is 25%, and the rabbi said as follows: look, if the owner is truly given up on the property, fine, okay, you'll get the property for 25% less. Give that 25% to the original owner, and we'll treat the property as if it's truly yours. Okay.
Do they do like let's get into extortion at all? Like where like you got one group of criminals say you have to pay protection for these people that are going to come take your property.
Yeah, I don't know if they were as sophisticated those days. They just did it on their own. It was before the security dudes of the mafia. So what happened was he bought from the Sikrikin first, then he bought from the original owner. In that case, we say the sale is not valid. Why isn't it valid? Because the original owner is still scared. It says he paid the original owner cash, and the owner says, okay, you can go ahead and acquire the property. But if they wrote out a document, then he acquires it. Shmuel says, even if he signs a document, it doesn't mean anything. In other words, if you went first to the thief to buy it, then you went to the owner. The owner wrote a document, it's meaningless. Unless he took responsibility, meaning that if one of his creditors takes the field, then he will owe back that amount of money to the guy who he just sold it to. Okay, in other words, let me give you an example here. So you have Reuven, who was attacked by the Sikrikin mob, and although Sikrikin didn't really need a mob, they just went alone. Reuven was attacked by Sikrikin. Okay, Binyamin came along and decided to buy the Sikrikin's fields. He went to the Sikrikin, he made a deal. Then he went to Reuven and he said, can you sign off on this? So Reuven charged him some token amount of money and wrote a document. According to Shmuel, no good. According to Rav, it is good. It is valid. Shmuel says, but if the document includes responsibility, achrayas, then the sale is valid. What does that mean? Let's say, for example, Reuven himself is a creditor. I'm sorry, Reuven is a debtor. Reuven is a debtor. And Reuven's creditor, we'll call him, I don't know, Zvulun. Zvulun wants to collect money from Reuven. Reuven has no money. So Zvulun goes to Reuven's property, including the one he just sold to Binyamin. And he takes away Binyamin's property. Now, what's the rule here? And because it's responsibility, Binyamin is allowed to collect the value that he just paid to Reuven from Reuven's money or any other property that Reuven would acquire in the future. If they see Rod Achrayas, then the sale is valid. Tiny can say that Shmuel. We have a brayso that supports the opinion of Shmuel. Shimon ben Elazar says, he took from a woman, then so this is the second scenario in the Mishnah, which is a man got married and he promised the woman, this apartment building is our ksuba. So in case of divorce, you can take this building. So what happened? The husband decided to sell the building. So he bought from the woman first, then for the man. Then the sale is valid, and the building now belongs to the owner. However, if he bought he bought first from the man, then for the woman. The sale is not valid. Why is it not valid? Because the woman doesn't feel comfortable denying her husband the ability to sell the building. That's why if she sold it after the husband sold it, it doesn't work. If she sold it before the husband sold it, then it is valid. Okay, unless the woman accepts responsibility. She says if her debtor collects that building, then she will have to reimburse the one who bought the building. Let's say this is a question, Rav. My achrayas na mishtar. The achrayas responsibility is the document itself. Doesn't mean just responsibility. It means the fact that it was in a document. Most documents have responsibility. Okay. And let's continue. Okay. Okay, let's introduce here. Cheskas Gimel Shanim. Familiar with that? The chazaka that takes 3 years.
Adverse possession.
What?
Adverse possession.
Is that say translated in English? I don't know. Okay, basically the idea is as follows. Before the days of the what do you call it? Those offices, public records, title. Before the days of public records, so how did you know who owned the property? So, in other words, the whole concept of public records in effect means that society is paying a person to effectively do nothing except sit in a room and look at documents. That's really what public record is. It's a room with documents. And before society was wealthy enough to afford those types of luxuries, how did we keep track of ownership? So you had a document of sale, but nobody wants to keep documents around forever because you have mice and rats and there's no floors in your wherever you live, there's no floor on it. They'll be consuming all the paperwork. So the reasonable proposition was as follows. If you were in a field, you lived in the property, you lived in the house, or you produced on a field for 3 years, you were considered the owner. At that point, you did not need to keep a document. This is most specifically spoken about Cheskes Sabatim, the third parak or fourth parak in Bava Basra. I think it's the third parak in Bava Basra. that goes through this at length. We discussed this very briefly, I believe, in Akaisef in Ksubis as well.
So they call it uncontested occupancy.
Okay, there we are. Now,
That's their little-
now let's say the original owner. So you have Reuven has fields. Let's say it was an ancestral field. So it was his family's field for hundreds of years. And now what happens? Now Reuven's trying to sell the field. Okay, a couple of days later, we find Shimon living on the property. Now, either it could be Shimon actually lived in the property, but he bought it from Reuven, or it could be that Shimon's a thug. So what's the solution for Reuven if Shimon's a thug? The solution is he makes a machal. He registers protest. He takes two people, and two people presumably are going to tell everybody, and he lets them know that he protests the fact that Shimon is still on his field. There's a very well-known rabbi who was part of a well-known institution, and he was maneuvered out of the institution. And he was sort of forced out, and he did have a right to a large stake of ownership in the institution. Anyway, I know him a little bit personally. He for whatever reason, he was not able to bring his case to courts, mostly because it was personal health problems. He had health problems, and he wasn't able. He didn't have the physical, fortitude to go through a court case. Not a healthy person. Anyway, every 3 years he makes a protest. He makes a protest. An Erev Pesach, and I know some of the people who he protested in front of. He brings 3 people into a room usually does an Erev Pesach every 3rd year, and he protests the fact that somebody else is sitting on his property. Nobody should think that he's giving up a claim to it. That's sort of the idea of the Cheskes Gimel Shonim. Okay, Tanur Rabbanan. So Logach Minas Sikrikin, he bought property from Sikrikin. And the original. So let's go back to the original example. So you have Reuven is on a property. Let's say it's an ancestral property, and the Sikrikin come along and take it away from him. Binyamin goes ahead and buys it from the Sikrikin and lives there for 3 years. And Reuven doesn't utter a peep. It's absolutely silent. Sure enough, after 3 years, Binyamin goes ahead and he passes it to Zvulun. Reuven has no claim against Zvulun. The Gemara says, hold on a second. Hey Chidami, what's the scenario? If the claim is that I bought it from Reuven, in other words, I bought it from the Sikrikin and I also bought it from you, therefore the sale is valid. Safilu Rishinami. In other words, what type of the Gemara here is trying to tell you that there's a claim that Zvulun has that Binyamin doesn't have. What type of claim is this? If Zvulun's saying, well, I think Binyamin bought it from you, then Binyamin has the same claim too. Binyamin could also say, I bought it from you. Same Cheskes Gimel Shonim. Same Chazak of 3. What was it called again? Uncontested occupancy? Uncontested occupancy. Afilu Rishanami. Either like a ton of if he doesn't say I bought it from you. Okay, so this is a fundamental point here, which is that let's say we find Beryl sitting on a property. We said, Beryl, how'd you get the property? Shh. How long have you been living here? 15 years. Okay, sure enough, Zusha comes to town, and Zusha says, it's my property. And Beryl doesn't deny anything. He doesn't say anything. The halacha as it goes to Zusha. Could be Beryl's a thief that's been living here for 15 years. The chazaka is only valid in as much as he claims to have bought it from the original owner. If Zvulun can establish he's the original owner, and Beryl is not willing to say that he bought it from Zusha, it's not that he has no legitimate claim over it. Just because, in other words, sitting on a property for 3 years doesn't give you a claim to the property unless you have a legitimate claim to it. It supports legitimate claim. If you're not willing to claim that you bought it from Zusha, if Beryl can't claim he bought it from Zusha, he just sat on the property for 15 years. Well, maybe he's a 15-year thief. So in other words, so what's the claim here of so we have Zvulun bought it from Binyamin, who bought it from the Sikrikin, who maybe stole it from Reuven. If Zvulun says, look, Binyamin bought it from you, well, Binyamin can make the same claim too. If he doesn't say that he bought it from Reuven, in other words, if Binyamin says I bought it from the Sikrikin, but I didn't buy it from the original owner, this is in the days where you had to actually have bought it from the original owner. In that case, so then neither Zvulun nor Binyamin can make the claim. If Binyamin says I didn't buy it from Reuven, then Zvulun can't say I bought it from Reuven either. So Amar Sheish Adam Deloika Tonley. The difference here is as follows. The difference here is as follows. There is a concept called ta'aninon, which is that if somebody has an easy claim to put forth, we would. The question is in general an open question: should Bezin put forth that claim on his behalf? And the answer in this scenario is depends on who. Okay, so what does this mean? So you have Reuven take Binyamin to court. Reuven says, "How did you get my field?" It says, "I bought it from the Sikrigan." And so Reuven says that it doesn't sufficiently explain it because you have to buy it from me too. And if Binyamin doesn't say that I bought it from you, even if he was there for 3 years, it's not his field. It goes back to Reuven as long as Reuven can prove that it was originally his. Now, the court here recognizes that if Binyamin merely says, I bought it from you, he would win the case. But the court will be silent and will not advise Binyamin, you have a better argument. However, with a Lekeach, Zvulun, who bought it from Binyamin, he has no clue how Binyamin got it. So in that case, we tell Zvulun, look, you bought it from Binyamin, you don't know how Binyamin got it, that's fine. Presumably Binyamin bought it from Reuven. Because he was there for 3 years, and we don't know that Reuven protested. We do this only on behalf of an inheritor or a buyer. The idach, but on the original owner, if he says that he bought it from Reuven, we believe him. If he doesn't say it, then we don't believe him. I'll start the next Gemara as well. Okay, we're learning about Sikrikin. What is Sikrikin? Sikrikin is a man with a gun. He's clearly a murderer. Somebody who's willing to murder. What happens if we have a non-Jew? He's not a murderer, but he's Abba Machmas, Chayv Machmas on Paris. Chayv is just he's an aggressive creditor. You know, the type of creditor you don't want calling you up. Or Machmas on Paris. On Paris is a thug. This is not a guy who's threatening murder. He's just a thug. Comes with the bouncers. There's no law of Sikrikin. In other words, okay, so now we're going post second version. So over here, the second version of the Mishnah was that if you buy from Sikrikin, the Sikrikin gives you a discount because he never really actually bought the field. He just stole it. He's a thief. So he gives you the 25% discount, which is what you pay to the original owner. Okay, so the law of Sikrikin does not apply to Anparis, to thugs or to somebody who comes claiming a debt. 1 second. Okay, and the reason here is because in either case, we'll see that there is 1 second. Okay, in other words, by Sikrikin, if he's there for 12 months and doesn't do anything, then he's sort of giving up on the property. Over here, the guy's just a thug and he'll get around to it. He's not in fear of his life. And therefore, it doesn't have the same law of Sikrikin. Okay, the Gemara says, the thuggery, he has to wait 12 months and then give the owner a quarter. The Gemara says, what does that mean? But that's the law of Sikrikin. The Gemara says, Hachgamar. Sikrikin the Sikrikin itself, you have to wait 12 months, and then you give 25% to the original owner, 75% to the Sikrikin. In other words, the Gemara is resolving that Sikrikin has the law of Sikrikin, which means first 12 months we give the master to redeem the property, the original owner, and then after 12 months it's split 75-25, and the law of Amparis or Machmas Chayev, which is a guy's thug or a creditor who's very aggressive in debt collecting, they do not have this 12-month period. They have a much longer period because the guy is much slower, but he'll eventually take it to court. He's not afraid for his life, like the scenario of Sikrikin. Let's continue for another minute. Amar of Yosef says, Naktinan, we learned, Ein Anparis beVovel. There is no such thing as there is no thugs in Bavel. Gemara says, people still get mugged. You know, there are thugs that remove people from the property. Ela Ema Ein Din Anparis beVovel. The law of thugs is very uncommon in Bavel. My time away is this keeping the Ika Bay Davar of also couple. I'm sorry, keeping the Ika Bay Davar because there is these are mayors or noblemen that are very powerful over their own cities. But also and because he doesn't go ahead to the mayor or the nobleman and complain, these people are very strict in enforcing the law. We presume that he's forgiven the property. So in other words, if you have thugs that take away somebody's property and he doesn't go ahead to court and collect and get the property back for himself, then we presume he's forgiven the thievery. And therefore, if somebody buys it from him, then the sale would be valid. Okay. See you tomorrow. Yeah.
Right.